My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mom tried to take it away to satisfy her new fiancé. Hey everyone, I just turned 15 3 days ago, and my grandma gave me an insanely special gift. She transferred ownership of her penthouse apartment to me. My grandma doesn't actually live there. She's more of a suburbs person and only uses the place when she wants to be closer to the city. So you can imagine how thrilled I was, especially since this past year and a half has been pretty rough for me. First off, my dad walked out on our family. He was always a workaholic and never really had time for me or my mom, but it still came as a huge shock. My mom didn't even tell me he had left until he had already moved out nearly a year ago. Turns out they had already filed for divorce by then, and it was supposedly because my dad was too overwhelmed by everything, whatever that means. He didn't even say goodbye in person, just sent me a text saying to be good. That was the last I saw of him. My mom got the house and full custody of my brother and me, but my dad hasn't used his visitation rights, so who knows what's going on with him. As if that wasn't enough, about 2 months ago my mom dropped another bombshell. She told me she had been dating a guy, let's call him Robert, for almost 3 months, and they were in love and engaged. I barely had time to process that she was seeing someone new before finding out he was going to be my stepdad. I was totally not happy about it because I thought 5 months was way too short to know if someone is right for you. But my mom seemed convinced it was fine. When I finally met Robert, he was pretty aloof with me, but super playful with my little brother. I figured it was just because my brother is only 4 and easier to engage with. A couple of weeks later, my mom hit me with more news. They were planning to move out of state. Because Robert had landed a great job offer, and they were going to leave me with my grandma. She thought I'd prefer staying with my friends and school, but I told her I'd rather move with them. That's when she finally admitted the real reason. Robert didn't want me tagging along. He thought I was too old to form a real bond with him and still stuck on my parents being together. My mom sided with him, which really hurt. I felt abandoned, but I told her I'd move in with my grandma right away. The move wasn't instant, but within a few days, I was packed and ready. I barely spoke to my mom those last few days at home and didn't even say goodbye when I left, except to my little brother, because I'm definitely gonna miss him. Living with my grandma has been great, honestly. She's been super understanding and loving, and life here is pretty easy. The only downside is the commute to school. I keep in touch with my brother, and I call my mom every evening just to speak to him, but we don't talk at all. 3 days ago, I celebrated my birthday at home thanks to my grandma. She threw a little party for me with some close friends from school and a few relatives she found on Facebook. It was a pretty big deal. Honestly, it was such a surprise, and it really cheered me up since I had been feeling pretty down after my mom dropped me off here. After we cut the cake, my grandma announced this amazing gift she had for me, and let me tell you, I was not expecting it at all. She said her lawyer would be the trustee for now, but as soon as I turn 18, the property is all mine. That was hands down the best news I'd received in a long while, and I had zero intention of sharing that tidbit with my mom. But of course, yesterday I found out she already knew about it. Someone at the party must-be spilled the beans, although I don't care who it was. What really got on my nerves was when she called me last evening to say she'd heard about the gift from Grandma. She went on to say that after talking to Robert, they decided he wanted to adopt me, but only if I convinced Grandma to hand over the property to him. She actually thought I'd be thrilled about this because it meant I could live with them again. Spoiler alert, I wasn't thrilled at all. I flat out told her I wouldn't do it, and she didn't need to call me anymore. Then I hung up. Guess what? She called back a couple of minutes later, but I didn't pick up, so she texted me instead. Here's the text she sent. I'm really sorry if you felt bad about me trying to follow Robert's lead and live by his rules, but you need to understand that after your dad and I got divorced, he was the only one really there for me. Sure, my family supported me, but it's different. He was there emotionally and even financially. You don't know this because I've never let you feel it or talked about it. I didn't want you to think badly of your father, but he's not exactly generous. The settlement and alimony are terrible, and child support is a joke. Remember, your father was the primary breadwinner, not me. I'm lucky he left us the house, otherwise I couldn't have even afforded rent. Our lifestyle was expensive, and I never had to worry about money when I was with him. But after he left, things changed, and I tried not to let you feel that. Even with extra shifts, I couldn't match his income. When I started dating Robert, he stepped up. I know he hasn't been kind to you, but that's because his past relationships with kids have been problematic. I knew Mom would take great care of you, so I wasn't abandoning you. I wish you could think about my happiness. Now I've arranged for you to come with us. Take us up on that offer and do what Robert expects so we can be together. Even your brother misses you. I know you're angry, but I also know you love me, and I love you. Reply soon. I love you. That message, to make me pause, but the last part really got under my skin. Just because she's doing everything Robert wants, she expects me to do the same. It felt so entitled and weak, like she lost all individuality. So even though her message initially softened me, it eventually just left a bad taste in my mouth. Half an hour later, I replied and told her I wouldn't do what Robert wanted, and she could move away with him, leaving me with Grandma as originally planned. I had nothing more to say because her behavior was so disappointing. When I talked to my grandma about it, she assured me she'd never transfer the property to Robert because she barely knows the guy and doesn't trust him. She was sure he'd just sell the apartment and I wouldn't get a dime. So, it's good I didn't agree to my mom's plan. But my mom didn't take no for an answer. This morning, she showed up at Grandma's place with my brother. Luckily, I was at school. When I got home, Grandma quickly filled me in. Mom was there to talk in person about the plan I'd ignored, or so she thought. I made it clear I hadn't ignored her, I had replied, and I was very clear about not wanting to convince Grandma to transfer the property to Robert. We don't trust him. I was firm and maybe a bit sharp, but can you blame me? Mom started crying and said she was just trying to make everyone happy, but it wasn't working. That really pissed me off because if anyone should be crying, it's me. I've been treated like crap by both my parents, so I told her to cut it out. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy, she was just trying to make herself happy and expected everyone to jump through hoops for that. So everyone else was totally on board with doing that, but not me. I had a whole life ahead of me, and I wasn't about to mess it up by chasing after her to make sure she was okay. Honestly, I think that threw her for a loop, and pretty soon after, she left. After some time, I realized she had blocked me, and now I feel kind of guilty about what I said. So, I want to apologize to Ida for telling my mom she was selfish and only cared about her own happiness. Update 1. Hey everyone! First off, thanks a ton to all of you who commented on my original post. Your insights really opened my eyes. There were so many things I hadn't even considered. It never crossed my mind that my mom's relationship with Robert might have started before the divorce. Maybe she's only telling us now because it's easier for her since the divorce is finalized. Honestly, I couldn't imagine my mom cheating, but now I'm not so sure. Who knows? Anyway, it's really none of my business anymore because she's made it pretty clear she wants nothing to do with me. The only bummer is that I can't talk to my brother, and I really miss him. We always got along so well, and I hate the idea that he might be Robert's kid, like some of you suggested. It's hard not to think about it once it's in your head. I've been talking it over with my grandma for the past few days, but we still don't know the whole truth. It's hard to think about my mom the same way now. I feel like talking to my dad might give us more insight, but I'm not sure if he'd even want to discuss it with us. It's been 4 days since my mom came to visit, and we haven't heard from her. On the first day, she blocked me, and later on, my grandma told me she had blocked her too. It's pretty ungrateful considering my grandma has been taking care of me without expecting child support from my mom. My grandma is retired and could be relaxing, but instead, she's taking care of me out of pure kindness and love. My mom should be grateful, but instead, she just blocked us. There are so many things I'm angry with her about, and so many questions I need answers to. I'm just hoping it will all come out in the open eventually. Update 2. Hey everyone! So this is going to be a bit long. My dad came by visit today evening. Apparently my grandma had contacted him but didn't tell me because she wasn't sure he'd actually come. Anyway, he did. As soon as he found out my mom was engaged to Robert, he rushed over. There were a lot of revelations and I'm still trying to process everything, but I'll try to explain. I was super surprised to see him, and even more shocked when he hugged me and said he was really sorry about everything. He sat me and my grandma down and told us the whole story. He said he and my mom had been falling out of love for a long time, but stayed together for my sake. About 3 years ago, he started an affair with a coworker. He wanted to tell my mom but never found the courage. Eventually, she found out about it herself about a year ago, and that's when she filed for divorce. She told him she'd keep quiet about his affair only if he agreed to her conditions. He had to leave the house to her, give her full custody, and even though he had visitation rights, he couldn't visit until she said it was okay. She also demanded a huge settlement for alimony and child support, and he agreed to all of it. The only thing he wanted in return was for her to keep his affair a secret because he didn't want me to hate him. So far, she kept her end of the deal, but it cost him his relationship with me. He apologized for always being a workaholic and not building a bond with me, but he said it was because my mom always wanted more, and he had to work all the time to afford the lifestyle she wanted. He admitted it wasn't an excuse, but wanted me to understand that it wasn't entirely his fault. I kind of get it, but it's still hard to come to terms with. The reason he broke his promise to my mom and came to see me without asking her is that my grandma mentioned Robert by name in her message to my dad. She wanted to know if he knew him. Turns out my dad knew Robert really well and came to warn us about him. Apparently, my mom, my dad, and Robert were all part of the same circle in college. My parents had been together since then. So, here's the thing about Robert. He's always had this crush on my mom. The night before graduation, they were all out drinking, and Robert spilled the beans about his feelings to my mom. But my mom was with my dad at the time, so she turned him down. She didn't tell my dad right away, though. It was like 2 weeks later when she finally mentioned it. She told him she was feeling confused, so they decided to take a break. My dad says they were on this break for almost 2 months. During that time, he heard from a few friends that she went on a date with Robert, but it didn't go well. Eventually, she came back, and when they patched things up, my dad asked her not to talk to Robert anymore because it made him uncomfortable. She agreed at first, but later that year, my dad found out she never actually cut ties with Robert. That led to a massive fight, and they nearly broke up. After the argument, Robert showed up at my dad's apartment, thinking a physical fight would somehow impress my mom. Instead, she got super mad at him for being violent, especially since she had already told him she just wanted to be friends. That was the final straw, and she finally cut him off. My dad always said Robert was kinda unhinged and never up to any good. After Mom cut him off, Robert moved away, and no one heard from him for years. Now my dad thinks my mom and Robert reconnected a couple of years back. She mentioned hearing from friends that Robert was back in town. My dad wasn't sure when she started talking to Robert again, but if they were engaged, it definitely meant she'd been cheating. So all those conditions she set were out the window. My dad said he's planning to confront my mom, but I wanted to talk to her first to get to the bottom of things. He promised to wait until after my conversation. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. It's messy. Both my parents have their issues, and it's hard to know who to believe. So, update 3. I finally talked to my mom without telling her I'd already met with my dad. She had blocked me, so I had to show up unannounced. 3 days ago, my dad visited, and yesterday, I found the courage to see my mom. She seemed surprised, but invited me in. Thankfully, Robert wasn't home, so we could talk freely. I apologized at first, just to make her comfortable enough to open up. I told her I was having a hard time accepting Robert into the family so soon after the divorce. Then I got down to it. I hinted that it seemed awfully convenient she met someone like Robert so quickly. I was hoping she'd come clean about knowing Robert from college, but she didn't budge. She just said she was lucky to have found him. I knew my dad was telling the truth about them being college buddies since he had pictures. As soon as my mom lied about not knowing Robert before, I knew who to trust. Then she made it worse by admitting she rushed into the engagement to forget about my dad and his affair, the one she promised never to tell me about. After that, I didn't see any reason to stick around. I told her I'd see her later and left. I called my dad and told him he could do whatever he needed to do because now I knew the truth. My mom is finally going to face the consequences. My dad isn't perfect, but at least he's not as bad as my mom. Update 4. Hey everyone, there's a lot to catch up on. Firstly, everyone was curious if my brother was actually my dad's kid. I was curious too. After my dad confronted my mom, they did a paternity test, and thankfully, my brother is indeed my dad's kid. Now my dad is fighting for full custody. Since I'm 15, they'll take my opinion into account, and I want to live with my dad. However, I'm currently staying with my grandmother because, even though my dad is trying to fix things, we still have a lot to work through. My grandma is my rock. My mom was furious when she learned my visit was just to find out the truth about her and Robert. She unblocked me once just to curse me out and then blocked me again. We haven't talked since. As for Robert, he dumped my mom as quickly as they got engaged when he found out that my dad was fighting to get the alimony and child support reduced. Turns out Elle was lying to my mom the whole time. There wasn't any real job offer. His big plan was to join his uncle's struggling business and use my mom's money to fund it. It's pretty clear now that's why he was pushing my mom to convince me to transfer the property my grandmother had gifted me over to him. They had been together for the past 2 years, and he was just stringing her along the entire time. So basically, my mom ended up getting totally screwed over, and instead of just being ashamed and keeping it quiet, she's been going around telling all her friends about it just to badmouth Robert. What she doesn't get is that her friends have been gossiping behind her back about the whole situation. That's actually how my dad found out, and eventually how I found out too. Honestly, I'm just really grateful that my mom decided she wanted nothing to do with me as soon as Robert said the word. I'd hate to be stuck in the middle of all that drama right now. Anyway, my dad and I have decided we're going to try working on our relationship. He's promised me he's going to try being a better father from now on. And as soon as he can get full custody or even shared custody of my brother, we're going to try to be a happy and functional family. I'm not super sure about the functional part, but at the very least, we can try to be happy.